continue with Hollywood Breakthrough, and today we have a really great guest. We have Misan Sagay, and she is the writer of Belle and The Secret Laughter of Women, and Their Eyes Are Watching God. So I'm just so happy to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit how you started writing in the first place. Where did that all come from? Because you're a doctor, right?
I did. I was. I qualified as a doctor, and I loved going to films. I've always loved stories, and I loved going to the cinema. And I was very distressed. I never saw myself on the screen. I never saw anything that resembled me or that behaved like me, and I felt excluded. I felt excluded by the way Black people were shown, especially women, on the big screen. And I felt that we have stories that people want to hear, and that we should be able to tell our stories. And so I started writing more to be able to tell the kinds of stories that I wanted to see. And I took it from there. But that's what inspired me to write. It was the need to watch, if more than anything.
So you did it late in life. Did you keep a journal or something, or have you always written?
No, I'd always written. No, I'd always written. And you need to understand something about medicine, which is that you're telling stories all day. That basically you're writing a movie trailer every time you see a patient. It's true, because the patient comes in, they tell you a story, and you then have to sell that story to your boss, to other doctors. You have to sell it to the specialist that you want, who wants to, who you want to do some procedure. So you've got to be able to tell the story in a concise and interesting way. You've got to hold their attention, and you've got to get them on side. So in a way, many doctors are storytellers, because that's, as well as the medicine, that's what you do all day. And you also come across a lot of stories, because everybody that you see is a story, and you're part of that story because they come to see you. So it's not as far away as you might think. But no, I started writing, and increasingly I did more and more writing. I was working as what we call A&E, and I think you call emergency room.
Right.
Or ER, don't you?
ER, right.
So I was working. So long periods sometimes of not very much happening, and then very, very busy periods. And so, I would often just sit and write and write something. And so I was writing all the way along, really. But the first complete screenplay I wrote was sent off, and that was made. So that was a rather sort of strange and odd way to come into the business.
How hard was it to write Belle? My understanding is that you had to do a lot of research.
Well, let me look at if you look at the beginning of Belle, how she comes, how she's picked up by her father and comes to them. There is one line in a parish record that may be hers. But apart from that, there really is nothing else of her early years. This is the always challenging thing about writing about Black people, and often as well women, is that the camera of history is not pointed towards us. So that even if we're there, we're participating. We could be the most important person in the room. It's just the way history is always written. If there is one white man in the corner, that is where the camera of history will be pointing. And so Belle was somebody who lived, I saw her painting when I went to school. She was somebody who clearly had a life, and yet there was nothing written about her. So when you come to write about something like that, you've got to do as much research as you can. But on the other hand, then you've got to bring yourself to what you write, because there is nowhere else to go. And for Belle, she was somebody I could relate to, because she was living with other people. In my own life, I lost my own mother young, and so the opening scenes of Belle are from my memory of being taken to go and stay with somebody by my father because he couldn't cope. So that's so that you bring yourself, you bring as much history, but you make it real, because in a way Belle was a Black woman who will have shared experiences with me and with you, and I think that's how you approach a historical drama like that with Black people, because we just don't, our voices aren't heard in the same way.
How difficult was it to get funding for the film in the first place?
It was extremely difficult. And, I could go to talk about racism, but in a way, it's also to be expected. It was a difficult sell. It was about a woman lead. Oh, let's take it further. A black woman lead.
Right.
For a movie that I didn't want to shoot handheld in, I wanted a big movie.
Right.
And I also didn't want, I wanted to tell it from a slightly different angle. I think if I wanted to tell it with Belle all the time, scrubbing the floors for them and stuff, and there's no reason why one couldn't tell that story, given we don't actually know how she lived on a day-to-day basis. I don't think she was scrubbing floors, but because we don't know, I could have gone that way. I didn't want that. I wanted Belle to be somebody who was of worth in herself, somebody who was beautiful to look at as well, and I wanted there to be real production values. So it wasn't an easy sell to have that, and then to talk about slavery, and then to bring in, as I've said, a part of history that perhaps English people are not as comfortable with, which is their role in the slave trade. And so all of those things made it very difficult to raise money in England. In the end, I had to go to HBO Films in America.
So was it also hard because it was a love story, you think?
I think so. I think that the idea, quite often on cinema, in the cinema, I think people are less welcoming, maybe less so now, but they used to be less welcoming of love stories with black people. I think they were always very comfortable with our suffering, or us suffering and then having an unhappy ending. So we'd have an unhappy ending which would show, and everyone would then feel sorry for us, and it was shown that this is how life is. And so I wanted to that gorgeous girl who gets the guy, and that was also maybe a bit of a problem. It was also an interracial love story. I mean, so there were lots of things that might make it more a harder sell, and I found that. I then did when I couldn't get people to see, I then did a spec script, which at that stage, at that stage in my career, I had offers for work. So to turn down paid work to do a spec script is quite it's a statement of one's faith in what one wants to do. And that's what I did. And on the spec script, HBO Films signed.
And then they brought it back to the United Kingdom after that?
Yes, it was developed with HBO Films over a period of time. And then, as always happens with these things, there was a changing of the guard at HBO. And the producer that I'd worked with, Julie Goldstein, left. And when she left, she wanted to take the project with her, which she did. And so and then a third producer called Damien Jones, who had also been interested in the project, in the painting, but he didn't bring any creative content with him, but he'd been interested in the subject. The three of us went together to the BFI in England, and the BFI then, at that late stage, then came on board. And I mean, they thought about it, and I did a further draft without pay. Oh. And on the basis of that draft, which was very well received, I mean, the producers all said, we're almost there, the content is there, this is terrific. There was a great momentum at that moment, because finally they could see that the content, exactly what it was we were trying to do, or I was trying to do.
What you were trying to do.
And so that's how it came back to the UK.
When you're sitting and writing the script, how difficult was it? What type of writer are you? Are you the type of writer that needs to be alone? Do you take several breaks? Are you the type of person that's kind of binge write? How is that as you work with your life? Because I know you have kids.
I have two small children and sitting lots of exams at the moment. So no, I have to, as a mum, I have to always do things around them. I always have a quiet 2 to 3 hours in the morning, say between 4 and 6 in the morning, where I write, and I don't have any disturbance then. I don't think my husband likes it very much, but there we are. So between 4 and 6, I do my first bit of writing, Then I get into all of the day and breakfast and the school run. And then I come back at about 9 and I have another 3 hours. And then around lunchtime, I then have to do, house other things. And usually by then, I'm pretty much written out anyway. So that's the rhythm of my day on the good days. As the film script goes on and it gets towards the end, I then tend to binge write. But there will come a time at which it just is, it's sort of you and that script. You got to wrestle that thing into shape. That's sort of how I try to keep that rhythm, and I try to write every day. That's the other thing. I try to write every single day when I'm writing, just to make sure that I just keep doing it, because if you stop, you sort of get out of the rhythm of it.
Okay. When you did Their Eyes Were Watching God, the teleplay of that, how was it to writing that?
That was a very different experience. They'd seen Secret Laughter and Harpo Films, and they loved that, and so they brought me over. And this film they'd owned the rights for a very long time, and that was a project that had stalled. There'd been a first writer maybe even 9-10 years before, and many other writers had tried to get it rebooted, including some very, very big writers. It's been a project that had been around, and people hadn't quite found their way into that book. And I think the real issue always with that book was not to make Janie seem like a bit of a baggage, really. Mm-hmm. Somebody who has so much and yet is complaining. And so that was a project, and no one had achieved, the ability to sort of get that put together. And that's what I did. That was what the drafts I did, that it gave a very strong framework of how you were going to get into that. And we also knew from then that was going to be a movie that was going to be made. I had a bit more trouble there with the dialogue. In that it was a much, writing African American dialogue was more challenging for me. There was another wonderful writer brought in after me who did a dialogue pass and did some other work on the script, and she was she's a most wonderful writer, and I remember reading some of the dialogue she did and saying, "Whoa, yeah." And I was very pleased, and even though there was a first writer that had credit, both of us then shared the credit in the movie. But I'm very proud of that film. I'm proud of the way it turned out.
Okay. So when you're writing right now, because you said you write every day, what are you trying to do? What are you doing right now, you think? Can you talk about it?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm writing two things. I'm writing for the BBC a TV series set in 18th century London, and that's very, very exciting. Sorry, what am I saying? 19th century London, 18 somethings, but 19th century
18
London.
Something. Okay.
Yeah. And it's a very exciting project for me, because once again, we're looking at a period of history that's very exciting, lots of things going on, and it was a great time in London. And usually this is the type of project that would be made almost exclusively with white people, because you wouldn't immediately think that there would be black people there. But it's one of the great things by having a black writer, or me as the writer, I immediately will look for a more diverse view of London, or a more true view actually of what London was like, and so it's a very, very exciting project of a TV series for BBC Films, and of course the movie that I've been writing, which is based on the Africans who fought in Burma.
Wow. Now, how do you do your research? How are you grabbing research? How do you find research for your work? Because you have to do a lot of because there's not a lot of information out there.
I'm very research heavy. I mean, the thing I always say is that if you're going to write something which is this is a very interesting thing that you've asked actually. When you look at all the records of the fight in Burma, the key thing you find is that every single white man there that died is named. He's given a little backstory. We always know, if a man got a medal, we'll say, oh, he was born in Wiltshire, the son of this, and this is how he died. And then there's a footnote, oh, and 4 Africans too.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and so what I do then is I fill it out, those 4 Africans, and I say, who were they? You go back to all of the original, you can't look at the records that were written, you can't look at secondary sources, because that's how we become in secondary sources. We become footnotes. If you go to the original sources, which I have done, which is going to the original reports that were made in, I go to the regiments that had those reports. We're doing extraordinary things. They were getting military crosses. And yet, somehow or other, we get lost. And so you've got to do the research. You've got to work harder at the research if you're doing this kind of thing, because I want to hear the Black voices. I want to hear women's voices, but I want to hear Black voices. And so one has to commit to quite a long period of research. You've got to find those people and find their voices, because in a way, history decided to write them out, and so you're having to reverse almost what was a deliberate process.
But how does that work with slavery? Because with slavery, things get kind of muddy. You don't see a lot of information. You don't know a lot of information. How is that when you go back so far when you can't find some content that doesn't really make a lot of sense?
I think with slavery, as I think we know, I don't know, there is a certain part of me that believes that experience for all of us is in some way tattooed on our DNA. Those of us that were left behind in Africa, and those of our families that were taken. I mean, the enormity of what happened. I know that people don't talk about it in that way. It's just that, but it was an enormous transfer of people, lives broken apart. And I don't think that sort of thing happens without you, without it somehow being part of who you are. And we are joined by that history. So that a few years ago, I was standing in Brazil on the beach at New Year, and they were worshipping Yemanje, which is a Nigerian goddess, and they do all Brazil. They all go there, and I turned around, and there was a Black woman standing beside me who could have literally. She looked at I am my people. We are Ishekiri. She looked Ishekiri, and I thought, if it wasn't for what happened, this might be the person who lived next door to me in my village.
Wow.
So I feel we are joined by this history, and also we're joined by who we still are. Very often when we're looking for slavery, if we can't find those stories outside, we can find it within ourselves, because we are still bearing those scars. We're still bearing. That story is only now ending as we begin to tell our stories. It's a chapter.
What would you tell some of these young writers, meaning not age young, but young writers over in general, like someone who's trying to write and be a screenwriter? What do you tell them as some of the hurdles that you had to go through to keep going? Because you had a lot of obstacles. What were some of the things that kind of kept you going?
Be professional. I think that's one of the things that is terribly important. And you've got to, it's a business, and it's a very, very hard and rapacious business. It's also great fun and, wonderful things. It's the most tremendous privilege to have work that you have conceived and written, and to see it out there. But you've got to be prepared. And I think that, one of the statistics that I was told is that of the 70,000 writers who've been members of the Writers Guild, which means that they're working at a certain level in Hollywood, only 70. That's since the beginning of the Guild. Only 70 are women of color.
Wow.
That means that most women who are writing, like most black are writing outside the system that can nurture them. It's very important that we try and find a way to make sure that young writers are nurtured so that their stories can be heard. And it's something that I feel very strongly about, because without that sort of system, the reason why most films are made about white men is that white men have been nurtured by that system of being protected in your early years as a writer, and then being able to grow in your career and be able to write the things you want to write. I've been very lucky that I've been able to follow that path, but there aren't that many. So what I would say is this: know that you're going into a business and look at it as that, as well as doing your writing. Always make sure that you have proper contracts that you're not taking advantage of in your early years. Write all the time, and don't be put off by people saying that the things you want to hear or you yourself want to see or write about aren't of interest. If it's of interest to you, then you will find an audience, and in a way that perhaps a white writer would never understand. We have to fight that fight. We have to fight the fight that our stories in which we aren't accessories to other people's stories in which we aren't just placed there in order to say diversity, but stories that are about us, that are of interest to us, that make us feel good, are great, are worth telling. And so you have to fight that fight as well. So it's be professional. Make sure that you tell the stories you want to tell, and don't get put off by all the people who say you can't, because by definition of who we are, we're all trailblazers.
Oh, wow. Yes. You did get that push off when you were writing Belle, though, a little bit. They wanted you to change the script a little bit, make it a little different. How hard was that to keep it done?
And to a certain extent, it always, especially when it came back to England, you always hit the point where suddenly all the script notes that come back, scenes of black people actually suffering. If you see black people in the water, those scenes are all cut and they're all replaced by white men giving speeches, noble speeches, because and you have to be really, really vigilant about that, because no one ever says it straight. It's just that when you see the cumulative effect, I call it, my joke is I always call it Wilberforcing, because suddenly everyone is William Wilberforce who killed slavery. If it was that good, and if all of them were that good, then how did slavery survive? but those are one of the hazards. But I think also, though, increasingly, the more films are made, the less people will be. And of course, we can't underestimate the extraordinary effect of Shonda Rhimes and people like that, who are writing and who are completely redefining how the kinds of films or the way black people are portrayed on television. And so these are better times than even when I wrote Belle.
What are you watching right now on television or film? What are you loving right now? Do you have any particular show? Or it's putting you in a spot, I know. I don't mean to, but
no, you're not. I'll tell you what. When I'm writing, I don't watch other things, because otherwise it affects what you're writing.
Okay.
I tend to be, if I'm writing, I tend to be pretty disciplined. I recently did watch Wolf Hall, though.
Oh, okay.
Which is an adaptation of the Hilary Mantel novel, and I thought it was everything that British television can be. It's just outstanding. It's a masterpiece.
Are you a fan of Downton Abbey at all?
I am. Exactly what it is, but if one looks back in history, that it was also nice that efforts have been made to make it sound to broaden the picture, and it is a certain type of film which is just enjoyable for what it is.
Okay. Everything you've done so far has been great, and I'm not sure if you ever go out to plays, things like that, but would you do something in the United States besides Belle? I mean, were you thinking about coming back to do a script or have something kind of done here, like on TV or anything like that?
I would. I think that, things are opening up far more in England now, but I would. I love working in America. I love the can-do attitude that one finds there. And I also love I think there is a much more honest feeling about what's gone on in the past and what needs to be said. I love the energy of African Americans, for example. I often feel that that a lot of the people that were taken were some of our best, you know. And so one goes there and you see the sort of beautiful, gorgeous and clever and bright people, and that's always a thrill. It's always a thrill. So yes, I'd work in America in a heartbeat.
Going great. Now, do you have anything you can read from us, either from Belle or any of your notes that you can actually feel comfortable reading? A little bit. I got you on the spot.
Let me see if I can find something. I hope I'm not being waffling.
No, you're doing great.
So let me see if I can find a.
I'm just looking over my notes. I have 2 more questions I want to ask you too. So, is your favorite color red?
I do wear a lot of red. I wear red quite a lot. So this is I love this scene because it's the heart of. I love this little bit of dialogue. It's the heart of the conflict that Belle presented when she turned up. One of the things I wanted to look at is what would they think her future would be, and I came to the decision that they probably would say that she shouldn't ever marry. I mean, there's obviously no historical evidence of that they ever said that, but I felt that really gave you an idea of what racism really is, even if it's tinged with love, because they think they're saying this because they love her and they don't want her hurt, but actually it's the most profoundly racist thing in a way, because what they're saying is that because of her color, she should be deprived of something that is a basic human right. Oh. So after Bella's just turned up and Lord Mansfield has taken her for the walk in the picture gallery, and has this recognized that she may be a little brown-skinned girl, but that she is a Mansfield, and they're going to keep her. And Lady Mansfield says, marriage. He shakes his head at the complexity of it all. Lord Mansfield says, impossible. Any match her other origins may attract would surely disgrace her in the family rank. And I think that to me, that little exchange that any marriage a child like that could make would disgrace us, and so we'll just deprive her of it. That says to me a lot about what really, really happened in slavery.
Wow. By looking at the script and the film, is there something in there that says, when you read something on the script and you saw it on the screen, was there one line or something saying, wow, that's the movie, that's it? Because the movie's great and the script is great. By watching it and knowing you wrote the script, is there something in there while watching the film this touched you so deeply, like, wow, this is so real? My pages came off onto the screen. I mean, it literally went that.
Let me just think which is the scene that I think that one of the scenes that I loved best was the scene when let me just think which is the scene that I always loved the scene where Lord Mansfield and the young men have come to the house for the first time, and Belle and Elizabeth is flirting and then playing, and then gets to play the piano. And then Belle comes to play the piano, and in a way, that's the first time anyone has ever seen her as other than sort of Belle in the background, and she plays beautifully. I felt that scene was always very moving to me, because it was a big turning point for her, because suddenly, from being called Belle, she suddenly realized, and I think all the people around her realized, she was Belle, she was beautiful, and that was going to change how she was going to be seen forevermore.
The actress that played Belle, was that the image you saw pretty much when you wrote in your head, that image, the image you portrayed?
I mean, one of the things that was interesting during the early writing of Belle was that there was actually another actress who's older attached to it, and so there were different ways one could have gone with how Belle could be portrayed. It was nice that my vision of a young girl like that, because sometimes it doesn't always work to have somebody. Sometimes you can have a more mature person, an older person, and they can have had more history at the time you're writing about them. But I think it worked very well, and I'm very pleased that that very early vision that I had of Belle being 16, 17, which is what's been shot, is has been borne out by the casting. And yes, she did a wonderful job.
What is the biggest obstacle you think you've had to go through life that you felt like you overcame, and what's the biggest obstacle?
I think as a black woman, I wake up every morning to fight a fight that other people may not have. And it is this that I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but I always have to be more, have to be better, have to be stronger, have to be faster, have to be more. I remember passing out of medical school. If I'm allowed to say it, I graduated top of my class, but that I constantly have to fight harder to just to be in the same place. And that's something I'm used to, and it's something that just comes with the territory. But I think that's the thing that I would say the biggest obstacle, that constantly people are comfortable saying things, writing things, treating one in a certain way, even, I don't know, shopping, that they simply that other people don't go through. And I think that's the obstacle. It's the day-to-day stuff, the fight. I got quite a sort of rather amusing story. A whole group of the mothers from my son's school, which is a sort of very, very sort of nice school, very, very gentle, quiet, sort of very sort of middle-class mothers. We all went on an outing to a shopping centre. And one of the mothers came up to me, she goes, "You know me, Sam? Shopping, are you famous? Because shopping with you is like a celebrity, because every time we go into a shop, somebody comes and says, 'Can I help you?' straight away. I sometimes have to wait ages to be helped." You get it. And I thought, well, I fight that fight every day. I go, "Can I help you?" You know what I'm saying.
Right.
So that's the fight, that irrespective of everything that I am, everything that I've achieved, I still have to fight for the respect of it. And I think that's the hardest part of it, because there's always the part of you that says, "Damn it, I've earned it." It's enough.
So, I guess for some of the things you're doing, I mean, since that's your biggest obstacle that you had to go through every day, what keeps you kind of like going then? I mean, what makes you just like, I'm gonna keep writing? What kind of drives you though? I mean, there's got to be something in you that just drives you. Just, I'm gonna write. I'm gonna keep writing every day. If I don't get anything, anyone sees the script, I'm just gonna keep going. What forces you to kind of keep getting up? Because it's hard. It's still hard
It
to
is.
be an African American film person,
Yes.
be an African American screenwriter, be a woman, not just in the United States but also in the UK. So how hard, and what keeps you kind of pushing and fighting?
Well, two things. One is that I think I'm probably naturally quite bloody minded. I think that when somebody, I don't know whether that means anything in America, but it means that if somebody is pushing back, I don't like to lose. That's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, though, that I believe in what I do. I believe in it. I believe in it as necessary. I believe that that there would be an audience for Belle, and there was. I believe that, it is so important that our voices are heard. I believe that this is our century for that. I think we've had 2 centuries of being the footnote, and we're now the story, and we need to tell our stories. And I believe that so passionately that you can kick me down, I'll stand up again. I'll stand up again, because this is not something that we can afford to be beaten on.
Gosh, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are amazing writer. I mean, hands
Thank you
down.
very much.
I'm looking forward to your other work. So I'm hopeful that it'll be soon, and hopefully that you'll get back on the line with me, and we'll chat again. So
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I really would be fantastic. And thank you very much for your wonderful, insightful questions. And it's been lovely, lovely. Thank you very much.